It's good to have a good man, a firm man, firmly in charge. And that's what Nebraska's got here. We will talk about it for the next 60 minutes right here at Huskers Live, right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. Yes, just a temporary change in scheduling. We warned you on the last show. Of course, here we are on a Friday, but we'll be back every Tuesday, 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 Central. And talking about a good man, we've got a good man right here. We got our top man. There he is, Justin Adams. Congratulations once again. He is a new man. He is Mr. Justin Adams. He is married man Justin Adams. Good to see you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Just got back from Texas, Wednesday night. And it was a good time out there. Like you said, got married, had a little small thing, just decompressed a little bit. It was nice to get out there and in the country, get to the little slow pace of life, get away from the hustle bustle of the city and kind of reset. But yeah, it was nice to get out there. Appreciate the congratulations and everybody who congratulated me in the comments before. I appreciate everybody supporting and showing love. So thank y'all so much.
Awesome. That is great stuff. All right. As always, of course, Justin is here knocking them dead, covering Nebraska football right here at the Voice of College Football. You can also catch Justin and our buddy Sonny Verma over on the Big Ten show. So get on over there covering the Big Ten. And guess what? We've got a Big Ten live show coming up right after Nebraska tonight on the main channel here at the Voice of College Football, 7 o'clock Eastern. And Nebraska, USC's a rival now. We've got a USC call-in show that's coming up on the USC channel, 9 p.m. Eastern time. But let's talk Huskers. And, when we talk about the top guy, the guy, typically talking about Matt Rhule, but even a step above in regards to the guy that runs the entire athletic department. Of course, Trev Albert's off to Texas A&M. Troy Dannon announced and spoke to the media, spoke to the public, and we both took it in, coming in from the University of Washington. And Justin, I will give you the floor in regards to what hit home with you.
Yeah, and first things first, what a hire. I just saw in Troy Dannon what little I knew of him. The most recent thing that I did know, covering the Big Ten show and covering Washington, was just how good of a hire that he made in that transition from DeBoer to Jedd Fisch. With that little turnaround that he had, it was a very short turnaround, 2 or 3 days, and how quickly he was able to make a hire, not only a hire, but a very good hire. I feel like that was the best he could have done with the situation that he was given. So, coming into this, I already had a recency bias towards liking Troy Dannon a lot from that. So when I saw that he was announced as the AD, I was very excited, and I know a lot of other Husker fans were. And we'll get into a little bit of why his tenure was short at Washington a little bit later. But yeah, first things first, just a really good hire. It kind of took some of the sting off of the old Trev Albert situation, as I expected it to. I figured that, based on the recent track record, that Nebraska would get the right guy in there. Chris Gaborik was going to, they were going to make sure that they got the right guy in there, right guy in place, because at this point it's really about making sure that everything that we have trending in the right direction also stays there. So it was kind of this juxtaposed position where you want a guy who's going to be able to come in and support all of the coaches and all of the staff members that we currently have that are succeeding, but in a way, find a way to complement them and make sure this transition's seamless. There's a lot of things moving right now. We're coming into the spring of football. And so it was one of those things where it's like, it needs to be a quick, seamless transition for whoever comes in here. And I think it seems that, they're on a similar mindset in terms of what they're looking for, in terms of, according to Matt Rhule and Troy Dannon, who I'm speaking about. And Trev Alberts, a lot of things Matt Rhule mentioned that Trev Alberts was good at, and the things that he did well at Nebraska, Dannon got into in his presser. And a couple of the things that initially stood out, he wants to really move with the landscape of college football. And he was talking about, today it's NIL, tomorrow it's something else. When he was with Tulane, thinking about NIL the way it is now, I think back in 2015 was when he started there, thinking about NIL the way it is now. And then, back then it wasn't even a thing that they even thought would ever happen. And so he's seen, a lot of these changes and adapted a lot of these changes. And he knows that change is part of the process. And the more we fight change, you kind of got Saban. I feel like Saban really got caught up in the whole, developing of college football and kind of in that old school mindset. It seems like Dannon has a mindset that's adaptable, ready for change, which in today's college football world, we have to do, because he states that he wants Nebraska to lead and not follow. So to be a leader, you have to be able to, recognize these changes coming, kind of like Trev mentioned with the, Matt Rhule mentioned Trev did with the revenue sharing. And you got to anticipate that stuff coming. You got to formulate a plan. So he's going to work with the collective to help them get prepared. He mentioned the style that Matt Rhule runs of physicality and toughness, and the style that he ran at Temple. Said to him and Matt Rhule have been friends, for a while since back then. And I know the press conference was very football oriented. And the reason that is of course, because the biggest thing about this and the biggest cash cow at Nebraska is, of course, football. But the biggest backlash potential of Trev leaving was Matt Rhule going to stay or leave? That was what people were questioning. And Dannon just kind of reaffirming that vision and getting ahead of it and understanding that, kind of like I said before, I was hoping that they would really take what Matt Rhule said into account and maybe, reach out to him and see, what he wants the next athletic director and use his words. And it seems that they did that. Dannon really wants to win. He wants to make sure that the funding is allocated in a way that no dollars wasted. And, he's just talking about the turnover at the top with the presidents, for instance. We talked about Trev Alberts not knowing necessarily who was going to be the official president, who was going to be his boss there. And I think Dannon mentioned, that they rotate every 3.5, 4 years on average. And so he's somebody who's going to be ready for that potential change. And he's going to be somebody who probably isn't going to waver. He expects these changes to happen above him. It's not going to be one of those things where he's going to up and leave when a president change happens or something in there happens. And he's talking about, is the alignment in place for success? And it is right now. Everything's moving the right direction. He said all the pieces are there, but you have to have alignment. And I think right now there is alignment in the athletic department. Again, outside of the other stuff and behind closed doors, I don't know too much of what goes on in there, talking about the Board of Regents and all that. But right now he sees the alignment in enough of a place for success to be able to happen under his tutelage there. And, he said he didn't, a lot of Washington fans were, a little upset because he was there for 165 days and he didn't expect to move, but it was one of those things where the opportunity presented itself and he felt like Nebraska was in the best situation for him to be able to go over there and be successful, even the communication. Governor reached out to him as well. As we mentioned before, the governor had reached out to Matt Rhule. And, he said he sat there smiling for a little bit after that because the communication was, I think, the biggest part that Trev brought to the athletic department. He was very much a liaison. Like, he was directly in communication with Matt Rhule. He was directly in communication with Hoiberg. He was staying on top of these things. And I think that communication with no disconnect is exactly what they needed to also have in place. Not somebody who kind of separates himself from the coaches and just sees himself as an overseer and then has a liaison who kind of connects, them to the coaches, but somebody who's there, boots on the ground, working directly with those coaches to see what they need. And he specifically said Rhule, is going to set those things up for him. He said Rhule's there to identify these challenges, and I'm going to be there to move those roadblocks and make sure that everything is moving as smoothly and as efficiently as possible. So he said a lot of the right things. I just, we'll see it. We'll see it in action. Again, we've seen a little bit of it. I won't sit there and say that I was Troy Dannen's, following him through his time at Tulane. I am limited to the Washington knowledge, but looking back at it, he did a lot of good things there. Negotiated deals with Nike, some ticket deals, some media deals at Northern Iowa. So he has a lot of experience in a lot of different things. I'm really excited and love the move. Love the move. I honestly think this was about as good as they could have done.
So to address him only staying at the University of Washington for what was about 5 months, 5 to 6 months, that is something that we're never going to be able to completely correct in college athletics. People are upset with players leaving, coaches leaving, and other administrators, athletic directors in particular, leaving. We all are mobile within the society. We have job opportunities. We are all in the job market per se, in terms of what is best for me, what is best for my family, in terms of my career path, upward mobility, what's best for my family, location, all these other things. So there are, when it comes to, let's say, the coaching cycle and the calendar in college football, I believe that there's a few things that could be put into play that would make that a little bit more palatable for a coach to move on. But there is no good time. The players are going to move on and the fan base is going to be let down and hurt. The coaches are going to move on and they're going to hurt the fan base as well, unless, of course, the fan base wants them to go. But most of the time when they choose to leave, the fan base doesn't want them to go because they're moving on to a better job. And it obviously hurts all the players that they've recruited and signed that are attached to them. So there's no way to completely come anywhere close to correcting just what is a right of all of us, and that's to move on to other employment. And you can't predict when that's going to happen. I'm guessing that he had every thought in moving from Tulane to Washington, and I'm sure athletically it's very much close to what the football status is of each of those schools. It's a sizable move up the ladder that he was looking forward to 5 years, 10 years, maybe a career at the University of Washington. Who knows? But opportunities present themselves, and you can't wait for the next opportunity when you find something that fits what you're looking for. Now, in terms of what he had to say, Justin, there is a formula that kind of follows these announcements, whether it's a new head coach or a new athletic director, and he followed a formula to a certain extent. Number one, if you are a Scott Frost or a Jim Harbaugh and you're walking back in as a legacy guy who has done great things, well, unless you really mess it up, you're going to slam dunk that press conference because everybody wants to see you and you don't have to prove any type of loyalty or connection. You are it. In this situation, he very much looked at what are the relationships I've had with some of the current people here. What do I know about Nebraska football and athletics that I can draw from to show that as an outsider, I'm knowledgeable about what this place is all about. And so I'm going to fit in. So that's one key point. And you see that across the board. And that's smart because people want to know that you, at least, even though there's not been a direct connection or you've not been in the inner circle, that you understand the culture. Maybe even from afar, you've watched, you have relationships with people that have worked there, have coached there, and therefore you know the culture and you can appreciate it. And then just a really strong job in what's something you addressed, connecting the past with the present and the future. Because that's, again, important to people that, the history. You know why this institution and this football program and this athletics program is so great, but you're not stuck in the past. You're not going to, you understand, okay, this is a different world. These are different challenges. So I'm going to embrace the past, draw from the past, and very much rely on those pillars of what we do at Nebraska. But I understand this thing has changed and it's changing fast and it's not stopping. We have to attack it. And so that was good to hear as well, certainly. And he's hoping to get together with Coach Tom Osborne this week and draw from his great wisdom and knowledge. So it was a really good first day for Troy Dannon.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, you know, it was one of those things where everybody's ready to hear what you got to say. So he did say a lot of the right things. You know, he had some quotable, you know, he had some quotes in there that he liked to throw in there. But overall, for the most part, he seems genuine and what he wants. And he seems very, you know, hardworking. Like Matt Rhule had mentioned before, he needs a guy that's going to go in there and just really work his tail off to make sure that Nebraska is a leader in this. And he echoed that sentiment. And it's, you know, it mentioned a lot of the same things, recruitment or retention, you know, priority one, that's Rhule's biggest thing, you know, retention and recruitment, because like Rhule said, you can't develop without retention. So, and then he's also said we're going to be data driven, and what Matt needs in a partner is what he's going to bring to the table. So yeah, like you said, just and the connections, looking back at the connections, this athletic department right now is all about connections. You know, Nebraska fans, we are always kind of after, you know, bringing back the prodigal son, the alums, because, you know, it hasn't worked out for the best in the most part. You know, Scott Frost and Trev Alberts worked out, you know, great in terms of what he did, but the departure wasn't the best. But, you know, Matt Rhule has a lot of connections in terms of, you know, his coaches and stuff like that, and the people on the staff that he's worked with. And then now Dannon drawing a connection to, you know, him being friends with Rhule and all that stuff as well. Yeah, it just seems like it's one of those things where they are trying to do whatever they can to make sure that the cohesion stays there. Everything that it's trying to not disrupt what is already moving forward. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing out of this is Dannon's not going to come in and have to do too terribly much. It's not like he's going to come in here and have to make a big coaching hire. He's not going to come after. All he has to do right now is come in and fine tune and continue things moving the direction that they are, and then just start trying to work on certain details. Like, you know, like we said, moving those obstacles out of Rhule's way, you know, the stadium renovation, stuff like that. He doesn't even know where to begin with that stuff. And because he said he was going to start learning about that probably, I think this coming week, he was going to start learning more about where they're at in terms of that progress and that process. So I would imagine that's going to be put on pause. We can get to that more in a little bit, but yeah, it's exciting. And like I said, it's one of those things where we don't have to judge him too much on what he's going to be able to come in here and do, because he doesn't have to do too much, like I said. So hopefully he can come in and focus on those little things, since he doesn't have a mountain to climb. He doesn't have a million things to take on. And that's going to set him up for success, you know, very quickly as we get into the Big Ten and the media rights and all those things. And there's going to be a lot of changes coming down the hatch. And so he should be in a position to where he's going to be successful and ready to be able to attack those things as well.
I also like that he leaned into, this is how Nebraska has taken leadership in the past in changing times,
Yes.
and been able to accomplish and implement things that were not being done elsewhere. Of course, the weight and the strength and conditioning program and the weightlifting and all that is one that most people are familiar with, even non-Nebraska fans.
Yeah.
Going back to the late 60s, early 70s, but stating that's who we need to be in the future, not just ride the wave and take things as they come, but to get out in front and to be a leader. So certainly people like to hear that.
Yeah. And then also just from what I talked about last week, when Rhule was talking about what he wanted in an athletic director, drawing some comparisons to what he was saying versus what Dannon said, in Rhule's presser, he said, somebody who can't worry about the optics or outside noise, just focus on being the best, right? And what Dannon said is fan bases make stuff happen. He says, the passion is not a bad thing. It's going to be used in some ways where it feels negative and but he said you can't mistake, that's passion. And so he very much understood, kind of what Rhule was talking about there. It's don't worry about what they're saying. Don't worry about any of that. Just focus on being the best and the fans will come along. Another thing, he said, must have a plan that is long-term and sets in motion the best for the future. Okay, that example he gave was the revenue sharing and Trev being ahead of that. And then, like I said, Dannon mentioned leading and being ahead of everything, and Matt being able to identify those obstacles and he can get them out of the way, and then investing to win. Matt Rhule said it needs to be somebody who's investing to win, and Dannon really spoke about looking out for the university and the student athletes and really focusing on, having backbone when it comes to those, focusing on the student athletes and being able to, get the right things in place to be able to land and compete with these big schools and the big money and those things. And just kind of his great vision moving forward. It's not about, who we retire, it's who we retain. So we'll see how retention works with him, and hopefully he's here for the long haul. I don't see Nebraska as a stepping stone to anywhere else, as much as Trev Alberts would like to think it is. So I do believe we're going to have Troy Dannon for a good amount of time, as long as we don't run him out of town. And but we'll see. One thing is for certain: as soon as we think that, things change. But I like the way it's looking right now.
We love the comments and questions there in the chat. We appreciate that. And again, Justin so much appreciates everyone's well wishes and
Absolutely.
Congratulations. And again, comments and questions in the chat. Consider the super chat option. And if you heard my explanation on our State of the Voice of College Football the other night, Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App is a better option for you. Just let us know that it is for the Nebraska show, the Nebraska channel. Again, you can find us at Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. It's down in the description section. Matt Rhule also spoke with the media just one day ago, and I made my way through much of that. I think really the first thing he hit, and you can bring some better light to this, because I knew that it was happening, but I don't really know how successful he was. He's obviously through the wrestling season at this point, but about Nash Hutmacher wrestling. And again, I didn't have a chance. I wanted to look up to see how successful he was, if he was in the Big Ten tournament, the NCAA tournament, and what he was doing. But of course, Matt Rhule was more or less talking about the transition from wrestling back to football, and that he needs to gain some weight. Now, how much weight, they may monitor that in terms of Nash feeling really good right now about how he weighs, but how is that going to translate to his effectiveness along the line of scrimmage?
Yeah. And so kind of the way it worked out was, I believe Nash or the wrestling coach had approached Matt Rhule last offseason about him joining the wrestling team, because he did wrestle a long time ago. I believe he wrestled a little bit in high school, if I recall correctly. And they took interest in him, and Matt Rhule's all for it. And in doing that, he did have to cut down weight fairly significantly in a short amount of time. And I think he understood that was kind of probably be the biggest obstacle to overcome coming into this. So yeah, it's probably going to be about getting him more size on him, because the one thing is that wrestling will help him with is, wrestling just helps you in terms of being able to move other people and use their body and use their pressure points and use certain, positions and hand positions and pressure point positions to be able to control somebody. And so what he's going to be able to do now, it's going to develop his skill set to be able to, use his hands to be able to, get around people, move people out of the way. And so it in a way, it refines the skill set. So, you lean him out a little bit and go do the wrestling, and that will teach him a lot, especially if on the explosive side of things, he's probably going to be in great shape because I'm telling you, wrestling's probably one of the hardest sports there is, if not the hardest. Um, and so I think putting on the weight will probably be no issue. I think he's going to be, you know, very, very much developed. He's going to be lean. He's going to be strong. And I'm excited. He did pretty well. I know he won, a few. I know he swept his first ever wrestling match, and the whole team was out there. Matt Rhule was out there. It was a pretty fun thing. But yeah, Nash Hutmacher is going to be an absolute monster next year. I'm happy that Matt Rhule let him do that and be able to juggle two sports, because I think it's only going to help him as a football player. But I see the size probably come back on him quickly. They're just going to have to add calories back to his diet and all that, because naturally he's sitting up there. He just had to cut that weight for the wrestling, but I'm excited to see his development for sure.
I know that Matt Rhule also was asked about the wide receiver room and what's going on there. I'll leave it up to you to take on whatever caught your ear, Justin.
Yeah, he mentioned a few things about the Isaiah Nair, Jamal Banks. Though they are veterans, they are very much rookies in this system. And a lot of you have Malachi Coleman, who's out for at least the early part of the spring. You have, your Jalen Lloyds and these guys that were young last year that are kind of more integrated in the system, just need to develop them a little bit more. And they developed as the season went along. But it's kind of just seeing what the room as a whole looks like. And it's having every one of these guys ready to play in a different way. With Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nair, it's less of maybe skill refinement, more of this is our system. Here's how we're going to utilize it. Here's how we're going to use you. With the other guys, Jalen Lloyds and all that, it's going to be about getting them reps and getting them development. And Matt Rhule mentioned that he has a very, very specific system of the way he's doing things in place. He has 3 fields with 3 different offense and defensive teams. One was the Bug Eaters and one was something else. I can't remember. And basically he says the injured guys are GMs and coaches for those teams, but essentially as opposed to what winter mat drills was. And with winter mat drills, and a certain part of it was about doing the things that you don't want to do, and making yourself go and do those things anyways. And that was where he was trying to figure out who are the leaders, who's going to step up and do the things that they don't want to do, but kind of find a way to find the silver lining in that. It's a competition now. So I don't necessarily want to go to watch, the basketball game tonight, but I know that that's going to get me points. So I'm going to go watch the basketball game tonight. Those little things that he did during winter mat drills. Now he's transitioning it over into what he talked about before, where now he's going to let competitors compete. And it's one of those things that's, iron sharpen iron, pressure makes diamonds, right? Like he's going to put these guys in a competitive environment. He's not going to sit there and say, we have X amount of drills to do. We're going to do this, this, that, and the third. So you're sitting there lining up, running different just route trees. What you're doing is you're actually getting out there and you're playing football in a competitive setting. And they're going to do it drill oriented, but it's a competition. And usually when things are a competition, they don't seem like work as much. If you're running by yourself and, you're running 3 miles, and then you go out there and you run 3 miles with a group of 5 people that are faster than you, you're probably going to do that 5 miles a lot quicker. And so that's essentially what he's implementing here. These guys are going to go out there and they're going to compete. Doing drills is one thing, but when you're lining up, to run a play against the DB, you want bragging rights over that guy, right? So you're going to, and you want to help your team win. So you're going to go the extra mile. You're going to want to look good out there. So I do like the way he's doing it. It's instilling competition, but a lot of it is, he didn't do it last year. And a lot of it is to get these young guys up to speed. He mentioned the quarterback room. There's not specifically a starter that he has yet, but he mentioned before the way to get better at football is to play football. So right now, what he has them doing is playing football. There's no, he said that these guys are just going to go have to attack it, and rep after rep, there's going to be less downtime. It's going to be using the entirety of the spring to their advantage down to the last week. Again, move the spring game so they would have an extra week to work. That's how, you know, important it is to be able to get these reps just with these guys the way they are. And the more reps they get in the better environment that they're able to get those reps in, the more competitive environment they're able to get those reps in, the more Raiola, Kalen will be ready for games, because drills are one thing, but running out there with an offense and a defense, getting different looks, that's a whole different world.
And it seemed like when Rhule approached the question of how well Kalen and Raiola are progressing, and thank you for the word there, progressing and understanding the offense, that I didn't see any obvious reaction there. It seemed like he was satisfied that they're understanding the playbook and the offense and getting it at a decent rate.
Yeah. And Matt Rhule is very much the type, and I think he's going to be more so the type this year, that he's not going to really show his hand in there. I don't think he's going to come out and praise any of these guys, because the way Matt Rhule sees it, he doesn't see Dylan Raiola as a 5-star number 2 quarterback in the country. He doesn't see Daniel Kalen as one of the top, quarterback recruits in the country, 4-star. He sees he doesn't see Heinrich Harburg as the guy who had terrible completion percentage last year, couldn't throw the deep ball. He's going to see these guys as just players on his team, and he's going to let each individual determine where they stand and how they are viewed in his eyes. And I've noticed that he has that approach. He doesn't get caught up in stars. He doesn't get caught up in any of that. And I think that comes from his style of seeing his ability to develop some of these guys that weren't highly regarded and into talent based on their work ethic and their athleticism. Again, he doesn't always get guys based on their skill set. He thinks there's a ceiling to development. There's not a ceiling, or there's a ceiling to athleticism and those things, but there's not a ceiling to development. So, sometimes he takes these guys who aren't as refined and comes in and develops them to be more refined. But in that, I think that's left him to be able to have a open mind when it comes to not just thrusting a 4-star or 5-star to the front of the line immediately. He's going to make them come in there and work and earn their keep. And I think that's a problem with like what Scott Frost did, for instance. Scott Frost attacked the people that he wanted to get in the recruiting classes. Those guys would never get pulled off the field. He left those guys in for better or for worse. I have no idea why. Some of those guys should have been benched. Lamar Jackson was one of them that got benched. I can't remember if he was originally benched under Frost, not the Lamar Jackson, Nebraska Lamar Jackson, of course. But, when he was benched, he came back and he played his tail off and he made it in the NFL. So Scott Frost wasn't very good at doing that. And that's something that needs to be done for these guys to get a wake-up call. He didn't transfer. He didn't go, run. What he did was he stayed in there and he battled. And I think Matt Rhule isn't afraid of guys leaving because he challenges them. I think Matt Rhule wants to challenge them to see who's here for the university and who's here for themselves. And so he mentioned Stephon Thompson and the thing, and him struggling in the press conference, him struggling just in terms of being in shape. But they have a higher standard for Stephon Thompson coming out of, being in Tony White's system before, and then now being out of it a year. Now they have this expectation, like, we need to get you in better shape than what they had you there. And little things like that. And the fact that he's going into these press conferences, he's not sitting there and blowing smoke up our butts and being like, yeah, Stephon Thompson looks great. He looks awesome out there. And then behind the scenes, he's, noting on his thing, he needs to get in better shape. No, he's out there and he's going to put them, put the fire under their butts, because what he mentioned last year in terms of the coaching staff taking accountability for the preparedness or lack thereof of the players or the mistakes of the players, you can already see the transition where he's starting to put the onus on the players a little more, like he said. And it's going to be more about them being accountable for their mistakes and less of the staff being accountable. The staff will be accountable for the mistakes they make, but the players need to be accountable for the mistakes they make. And I think that's the biggest thing that I like in Rhule versus the previous staff. There is accountability. There was no accountability before, and that's already showing. I mean, we're just barely into the second spring, and those comments are already showing. He's already putting his money where his mouth is in regards to that. So, you know, the quarterback room looks to be coming along. Little clips out there, you know, take what you will from those little clips, but one thing's for sure, Raiola's release, you know, the arm strength is there. His release looks quick, it looks fast and effortless. There was a report I saw on Twitter that Heinrich Harburg, you know, his accuracy got better as the drills went along. And so we'll see if hopefully Heinrich Harburg in his position to where he can at least boost up his accuracy and be somebody who can step in there if need be and be able to fill the void. But I think with the way everything's setting up and how they have these guys working and how much they have these guys playing football and just how much he's ramped everything up because of that, I think he's going to have these guys ready to rock and roll. And yeah, I'm excited to finally see year 2 start to actually take place and see some of the things that he talked about in year 1 and kind of in this winter come to fruition. So
Huskers Live. No, it's not Tuesday, but don't change your calendar. This is not a permanent move. It's a special edition, and it actually worked out this week, considering that Matt Rhule spoke on Thursday. It also worked out pretty well because Troy Dannon, the new athletic director, was announced on Thursday, so we could respond a little sooner to those press conferences. But we will get back to our normal day and time next Tuesday, 7 Eastern and 6 Central. We appreciate the Super Chat contributions and appreciate your comments and questions. Somewhere in all that you stated there, Justin, you mentioned, you said something about you were comparing just kind of work ethic and those things that can be controlled versus athleticism that cannot be controlled. It can be enhanced, of course, through hard work, but can't be controlled. Matt Rhule said something about Emmett Johnson being one of the best athletes on the team. Is that pretty much how you saw Emmett Johnson before today?
I loved Emmett Johnson. If you go back to my running back preview before last season, I was a huge fan of Emmett Johnson because it wasn't really noticed, but he was getting, you know, a lot of reps with the first team in spring of last season. So when he actually came onto the scene, I was not surprised to see his success. Yes, he was very athletic, and you know, on his film, he showed all of these flashes. And he's talking about just in every measurable, he is at the top. And we saw last year just how much that athleticism helped him just come in and be able to, on a team that didn't have a, that's what another thing people don't realize is, like, not only did he come in and have success running the ball, he came in and had success running the ball on a team that couldn't pass the ball, and a team that relies, you know, the offensive system that relies on the run game to set the pass game up. So I am extremely excited to see what his development looks like year over year. And he talked about with guys like him, you know, it's finding out each individual player's path forward and how to set each individual player up, you know, to get to the NFL, and how to fix each individual player's deficiencies instead of finding a system for everybody to kind of fall into. What he's doing is he's working on nuances of each individual's game. So Emmett Johnson is probably one of the people I'm most excited about, because I think he might be one of the biggest surprises, you know, in the conference next year, depending on how they utilize the running back room with Dowdle, how long Gabe Ervin and Reamer Johnson take to come along. Emmett Johnson may get a big taste of playing time early on, and I hope he does, because you know, the athleticism was always there, and it's nice to see hear some data showing that, you know, where he actually stands and where some of these guys stand, because yeah, was one of the people that was very excited about EMT Johnson last spring, and I was very much in the minority. But yeah, I'm excited to see him this year for sure.
Talking Huskers with all of you each and every Tuesday at 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 Central. Join Justin here. Join him on the Big Ten Show. That's a channel right here on YouTube. The Big Ten Show. Justin, Sonny Verma doing a bang-up job covering the Big Ten top to bottom. Also, there's some news and notes out there concerning some moves that have been made on the recruiting landscape that kind of changes some targets and brings a little bit better into focus who might be available out there.
Yeah, so just a couple of the quick housekeeping stuff with that. We had Jack Lang set up a visit with Nebraska June 21st, lineman. He's set up also to his top 4 are Wisconsin, Missouri, Michigan, and Nebraska. So he has it's the last, believe his last visit is Nebraska June 21st. Adonis Curry, he's down to, I believe, what is this, 8? So he's Nebraska, Oregon, Texas, Miami, Texas A&M, Washington, and a couple others. So those are the big ones. So Nebraska also in on him, top 8 on him, 4-star. And Marcus Garcia, who I mentioned before in a live stream back around the time they did the Elite Junior Day. They're in his top 8 now with A&M, Michigan, Arkansas, Penn State, Missouri, Florida, and Ole Miss. The biggest ones were, the biggest kind of that might pop up on Nebraska's radar. Jamarian Parker in the 2025 class, decommitted from Arkansas. He's the 18th ranked running back according to the 24/7, not their composite, but the regular 24/7 rankings. He's a 4-star, 6 foot, 185. He's a running back. He very much can. He's one of those guys you could want to get out on the edge. He's a burner, quick acceleration. On his film is a lot of him getting on the outside and just kind of beating people. And then he's really good at zone blocking schemes. You see a lot of trap runs on the film. So very much one of those zone style running backs where you got that one cut system, or you can just start running some motions and get some traps going in there. But potential that, he sets up a visit for Nebraska if he hasn't already. And then the other name that just, dropped today that people were looking at is Will Nixon as a grad transfer. Of course, he was already on Nebraska, transferred out. This was pre-Matt Rhule, of course. He's from Waco, and his dad actually coached with Matt Rhule at Carolina. So it's one of those things. We'll see if Nebraska takes interest in him and maybe adds him as a depth wide receiver, piece. I would imagine as a running back wide receiver combo with the running back room Nebraska currently has, probably lean more towards the wide receiver side of that. So really interested to see how they approach it with him. And again, they do have the numbers to come down, but of course, at this point, what it is you got to weigh out what you have versus, if this guy is more talented than a guy we have in the room right now, then you got to clear room for him. Simple as that. And I know his stats, well, as you see him there, you just pulled him up. So his stats, in very limited action, hasn't done too terribly much, but he is a very, he's a very good player that is going to be able to add depth to a team that desperately needs it at the wide receiver position, of course. But yeah, so we'll see how that comes along. Potentially somebody you can add on here late in the spring and still be able to get a talented depth piece going there. So.
Well, I watched quite a lot of Washington football last year. Of course, they made it all the way to the national championship game. I'm not going to pretend to know Will Nixon and that I was locked in on what he was doing. I got to think by looking at his rushing and receiving numbers that I saw him carry the football a few times. Mm-hmm. As a wide receiver with 33 carries, he sounds like he's a big jet sweep guy. That's what that number usually shows.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a Xavier Betts style. Xavier Betts was the jet sweep king at Nebraska before he transferred. I think like 2 of his touchdowns were just long jet sweeps. His first one was a jet sweep. So very much one of those guys that can come in here and really, the positionless offense that they want to run. He can even be used as a package type of guy and come in here and be able to be moved around. I think that's one of the things that might have Nebraska take interest is the versatility. The only thing is, I believe he might only have 1 year left to play. It's a matter of, does Matt Rhule want to take a guy with 1 year to go with a shortened spring and a shortened off season? That's another thing too, because he's very much about development, getting these guys in here and getting the reps, getting them intertwined to these systems and these things he likes to do. So he'll probably weigh out, the depth versus does he want to bring this guy in, or does he want to just stick with a younger guy that we already have in the room that he can develop? So it'll be interesting to see just kind of how he plays that, because if they do have a younger guy there that they think can be similar in production, they're probably going to stick with him. So that way they can see it through and see the development through. But I do believe at least it will be of their best interest to inquire and just kind of put the feelers out, which I'm sure they will. They'll probably keep it close to the vest, but I do expect them to make one or two moves this spring for sure. So not sure where it'll be, but
I was also curious to run through the scouting reports and evaluations for some of these guys that you ran down. So here we've got Adonis Curry.
Yes.
And so we're looking at 6'2", 165, as you mentioned.
Yeah. He's got that rangy frame, cornerback frame that Matt Rhule is going to like to have in his cornerbacks. For instance, Hartzog is playing specifically primarily with the safeties now. And a guy that I really liked out of this transfer portal class, well, he was kind of the lowest rated guy, was Bly Hill. Adonis Curry, very much a similar body type to Bly Hill. I believe Bly Hill will probably be the guy Hartzog takes over for Hartzog. And I think Adonis Curry is one of those guys that could come in and be a very similar guy to learn behind Bly Hill to be able to step into that role. So I think he definitely wants him to be in here as a cornerback specifically, not one of those hybrid guys.
14th rated cornerback in the country and a top 14 player in the state of California. And the other services like Adonis Curry a little bit better than 247, although there's nothing wrong with being ranked number 190 in the country by 247 Sports. But that ranking goes all the way up to 137 with the others included. So it certainly looks like other services have him ranked in the top 100.
Yeah. And it just starts to show that as time goes on, I think Matt Rhule early on was a little bit conservative with the offers for the most part. Now we're starting to see him really attack a lot of these guys that, are already 4 stars, in this offseason that have the potential to be 5 stars. So we starting to see that, at Baylor and Temple, we talked about how you develop 2 and 3 star recruits. Well, come out of Nebraska, he doesn't necessarily have to stick with 2, 3-star recruits. He can come over here and start really going after, again, because Nebraska's got, the history and everything. We all know money and all that. So he can actually start attacking some of these 4-star, 5-star guys, and that's what was a big thing about getting a guy like Rhule and the 5 stars and getting some attention to Nebraska and getting eyes on Nebraska, because now the longer he's here, the longer time goes on, we're going to land a lot more of these guys. And the proof is in the pudding, because all of these guys are not only being offered, but setting up visits as well. And they're in the final. They're, Nebraska's in their final 4, final 8. And again, that was something that wasn't necessarily happening before. And it seems like, most of the offers and most of the top 8s and 4s and 6s that we're in are 4 stars, and whereas Nebraska was primarily just 3-star, 3-star, 3-star. Matt Rhule loves the guys. I've noticed that the majority of the people that he gets are around 87 to 89 rated 3 stars. So he likes those fringe 4 stars as the 3 stars. And then, of course, he's going to attack the 4 and 5-star guys, but he really loves the fringe 3 stars. And I think that's where he's trying to get to, where those guys are going to kind of be the low end, and then he's going to transition it up as time goes along. So we're already starting to see him put out some bigger offers than he did last offseason, a lot more of them. And I just it's exciting to see because it seemed like before it was a lot of swing and misses and no backup plans, and Nebraska would just have to go get some low-rated 3-star, something like that. Matt Rhule's approach to this and his attack to this, he very much has these relationships built to the point where these guys are every guy that he offers, every guy he gets on campus is very, very interested. So every time that Nebraska sets up a visit with one of these guys, which they have with all three of these, it means something and should be paid attention to. So
I was just smirking because, Justin, for you to be that perceptive to notice that Matt Rhule is zeroing in on the 87 to 89 rated guys, that's pretty good.
I was going through position groups and like I would pull up the freshman, redshirt freshman. I would, talk about, I'll pull up whether they're 4-star, 3-star, and say their rating. I'm telling you, like 9 out of every 10 was like either an 89. Like I would say the majority of them were 89 and then a couple of 87s. I was like, something like that. It was just a correlation on every single young part of position groups I would go through. They're all 89 rated 3-stars. I'm like, dude, this is crazy. Because I actually mentioned, I think, on my wide receiver video about just like, that was like 7 in a row or 89 rated 3-stars. So I'm just a recruiting nerd, so I notice little things.
You are, but that's okay. That's why we got you here.
Yeah.
So who else did you mention? I was just curious about rankings.
Yeah. So Adonis Curry, Jack Lang, Lange, and then Marcus Garcia.
So we'll grab Lang here.
And then we'll talk about him first. But I was going to say earlier, I forgot to, on the Dannon stuff, just mentioning when I was mentioning what I'll pull that up. Actually, I'll record in a video. I'll do a Dannon video, and I'll talk about the Nebraska Washington stuff that I forgot to touch on there. So since we'll talk about Lang here because he is an offensive lineman. Nebraska loves offensive linemen. 6'8", 275. That is a big butt dude. I was going to say the A word, but I don't want YouTube to strike us down.
You're good.
He's a big ass dude. 6'8", 275. Midwest kid. You like those Midwest linemen. But he Nebraska's in his Final Four. This has been one of the guys that has been probably one of the more talked about targets of the 2025 class in terms of offensive linemen go. So this would be him being in the top 4. And now it's Wisconsin and Michigan are 2 of the other 3. So this turns out to be a little bit of a Big Ten battle here. So this will also be important to watch to see where Nebraska kind of stands in some of these things. Michigan with the new staff, Wisconsin with their new staff, Nebraska with their new staff. So some heavy hitters, then you got Missouri's home state team. So it'll be interesting to see if they can win the recruiting battle over the Wisconsins and the Michigans, because again, Nebraska hasn't won a lot of recruiting battles against Michigans and stuff like that. So that's another aspect of these too.
And we see another guy that's safely within the top 150 in the country. And that would be a huge get just based on that. I know nothing about him. I'm hearing the name for the first time, but just you got to trust the recruiting rankings. Not that they always play out, of course, but he is a top prospect.
Yep. And then the Marcus Garcia, who's from Denton, Texas, he's the 38th ranked offensive tackle according to 24/7, but the composite has him as a 90 rated 4-star, 321st nationally, 54th ranked player in the state of Texas as well. So really attacking the trenches here, and like I said before, just going after these guys, and he's slowly increasing the caliber of guys that he's targeting and going after. So
good stuff. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. And for those of you just joining us, all you need to do is watch the rest of the show. As soon as we get done live, you can always go back and catch what you missed. So don't forget to do that. And we'll be back here next Tuesday at 7 Eastern and 6 Central. Join Justin and Sonny Verma on the Big Ten Show. It's right here on YouTube. What's going on over there, Justin?
So we kind of recorded a video before I left. Big Ten coaching power rankings. We had that one up. Some spring storylines to watch. So we had a couple of videos posted. Now that I'm back, we're gonna be hitting it hard. Probably get some program overviews, which are our most popular videos out. Nebraska's will be coming very soon. And so, yeah, if you want some intel on your Big Ten foe, and especially the new Big Ten foe, we have a lot of program overviews for USC, Washington, Oregon, the whole nine. And we got the second half of the Big Ten teams coming up too. So y'all get over there and check it out.
Very cool. All right, Justin, good to see you again. Good to have you back. And here we go, folks. Through spring practice into the next portion of the off season, there will be a transfer portal that will be back wide open here very soon. And of course, the spring game's coming up. So lock it in here at the Voice of College Football GBR, everyone. Again, we will see you next Tuesday. Enjoy the videos, and we will see you soon, folks.